Anyway, let's start as we usually do with maybe about 10 minutes or so of meditation and taking refuge. So we just want to settle into our meditation position. So again, this mudra, if you don't do it already, you can't really see anyway, like this. Oh no, it doesn't work. You lose me. This is a very powerful mudra, putting the two thumbs together with the left hand supporting the right one, sort of cupped on the lap. I think it helps. It's supposed to kind of help center the energy around our central channel when we do the 9-round breathing. Of course, we need to move everything, move the hands and everything, but just sitting like that for a minute, just being in that mudra with the spine, sorting the spine so it's a little bit more straight and erect, just feeling that energy, that mudra. It helps to align us internally. Taking a few breaths, being with the breath, at whatever rate we need to be, whether it's deep or shallow. It usually slowly deepens as we just stay in that space. And just a few minutes reflection on refuge. So as we maybe know already, or as we're learning, the practice or experience of taking refuge has these 3 causes or levels of motivation. Depending on the depth of our motivation, that much more we experience this kind of soaking of our mind with the qualities of refuge, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. It's a little bit like when we bathe our bodies, there's different ways of bathing. So it's very congruent to that, how much, depending on our motivation, our level of faith, that much more we get bathed, nurtured by the qualities of the 3 rare sublime ones, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. The first level of motivation, if we remember, it's kind of through thinking about the beginning of the Lam Rim, recognizing that we have this continuity consciousness and that, because we're not free of delusion yet, there's a danger that we could be born in our future lives in a realm that, is not favorable for us, either in the human realm, in a place, an environment that doesn't support us dharmically, or even in another realm, spirit realm, animal realm. So at that level of motivation where we want to ensure we don't go to the lower realms, it's a bit like taking a shower, there's this temporary, it's not deep, but that motivation to protect us over the bardo. It's similar to taking a shower, we get a sort of temporary benefit of ourselves being protected into the future life. Protected at the time of the bardo, protected into our next realm of existence. Like a shower protects us temporarily, from being unclean. We feel more comfortable for a more temporary period of time. And we get that level of blessing at that level of motivation. Second level of motivation is taking refuge. It's when we, on a more deeper level, recognize the nature of our samsara. It's not just one life we're looking at. It's many lives circling in cyclic existence. Its many lives of being born in many realms with many forms, many different environments, many different types of suffering. And when we generate this deeper wish to be free from that, renunciation, we take a deeper refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And it's kind of like taking a bath, bathing ourselves at that quality. We need to rely more deeply on them, like we rely on water, a vaster body of water, because we need that blessing, that protection. So there's a deeper blessing that comes also at that level of refuge, that more heartfelt commitment to our practice and to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Then the third level of motivation, where it's a bit like bathing in the sea, an even deeper level, a kind of reliance. It's like submerging ourselves. We want to completely unify ourselves with the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, with all their qualities, because we have this motivation that we want to benefit all beings. Our motivation's faster. It's the great motivation, the Mahayana motivation. So our qualities need to be vaster. So that experience of taking refuge is like going into the sea and bathing in the sea. We're completely immersed in that experience, and we want to unify deeply with the ocean-like qualities of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. That's the ultimate goal and the ultimate motivation. And at that level, we create so much merit and purification. Even if we can just touch on those three levels of motivation, each time we create merit, we purify our mind. And we draw forth in our hearts this blessing of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha and their qualities. So just think for all beings, with this kind of just touching on these three levels of motivation. For all beings as vast as space, just like me, swallowed right now in samsara, really immersed in that, the cycle of existence. But each one of us having this incredible potential, in every moment to transform and change the mind. We take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, those who have already developed that transformation. We seek their guidance, blessing, protection. We want this deep immersion, unification with our qualities for our own enlightenment and for all sentient beings. So we'll recite once in Tibetan, the refuge prayer, twice in English. Sangye chodan soge chognamla chanchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi dagi chen soge be sonamge drola penjir sangye drupashok. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. And again, just drawing forth those blessings, the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, the Dharma, the ultimate Dharma, refuge, the wisdom realizing emptiness, the Sangha, the community practitioners. That's courage, blessing quality we draw forth when we chant the mantra a few times. Tayada om mene mene maha minaye soha. Tayada om mene mene maha minaye soha. Tayada om mene mene Mahaminaye Soha. Tayada Om Mine Mine 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 Mahaminaye Soha. Okay, so this week, welcome to class. This week is the last week of classes in the Refuge module. So I have to say that probably we needed one more week. So, we'll get through mostly what we can. In the practice day, for those of you who are able to come, we might just cover the last 20 minutes or so, because I think we could have done with another class. I don't like to rush it too much, but we'll do our best today to get through what we can without going too fast. But I probably will cover a little bit of this just to finish finish the classes, in the practice day, as well as doing some meditations on refuge. So last week we went over the 8 benefits, of taking refuge, and we started, in order. One of the causes of refuge, as I mentioned before, the 3 main causes according to the Lam Rim, why we take refuge. And also the other causes of, having faith in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, developing a sense of conviction, devotion, confidence in their qualities, and a confidence that we can achieve that, and aspiration, these different levels of faith that we also talked about in one of the classes. So in order to have a certain faith, develop a conviction, we need to study the qualities. So last week we started studying the qualities of the Buddha's body. So we just follow on from that. And again, you can also find these very clearly discussed in the readings, nicely in the Lam Rim book, the Lam Rim yearbook, and also in some of the readings goes through, But anyway, we'll just cover them here as well. So qualities of the Buddha's speech, as Lama Yeshe says, it's the experience of luminous penetrating wisdom that gives Buddha's speech its power. The true power isn't necessarily, as Lama's saying, and this what we're saying, it's the quality behind the speech, it's the quality of mind that gives it power. Lama Zopa Rinpoche actually has us in the morning. One of Rinpoche's morning practices, I would say more for intermediate level beings, intermediate practitioners. But one practice is blessing the speech, to make our speech more powerful, to purify our speech, because when our speech is powerful, obviously people listen, And so the Buddha has incredible power of speech, he's developed over many lifetimes of keeping silence, practicing mantra, having virtuous speech, speaking kind words. So, and of course, it's also behind that, as Lama said, it's this incredible wisdom, it's like this wisdom that sees reality, this wisdom that can also see all beings' minds, and they know exactly what to speak, what to say to each being's minds, what to teach. We have one senior nun in our tradition, and I think, in the beginning, when you have this experience of being around sort of high lamas, and especially if you start to feel a connection with one particular guru or lama, one nun said for a long time she used to think, when she went to Lama Zopa and she was teaching, that it was just speaking to her. It wasn't speaking to anyone else. It was so personal, the teachings that she received, and it took her some time to realize this is the quality of enlightened speech, this is their quality, that they can speak to you and all other beings. And it becomes very personal, So it's very powerful. I mean, you can see the power of somebody like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Thousands of people come and they all receive, they receive something very deep and personal. They wouldn't keep coming. So another thing, which can empower Now, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about, other maybe holy beings. But I mean, of course, you can do it in any situation. But they do actually advise, one of the kind of advices in the Lam Rim is when you attend teachings to just visualize that you're in a pure place and that you're actually receiving teachings from the Buddha directly. I mean, even if we think about that right now, if we were there at the time of the Buddha, when he was walking around India, there was all these holy beings, all these monastics following him, walking around. Hundreds of people would come wherever he taught. They just gather and they put up some sort of makeshift seat, so the Buddha was always taller. That's one of the things with teaching. You should always be higher because of the Dharma, the power of the Dharma. But can we imagine, somehow we get some imagination or feeling of that when we read some of the sutras, maybe. So we can try and feel that. It's very powerful to imagine that because it has a deeper impact on your mind, just feeling that you're in the presence of a Buddha, imagining that. So the other way that teachers can teach, and also through my experience, they can also just teach with gestures. Like you can see Lama Yeshe there, his hand gesture, the way his eyes are, that's a form of that's how they communicate to us. It's very powerful. Subtle movements, eye glances. It's, when they have this power of mind, realization, then it's very powerful how they communicate with us, in all different ways. And this is the quality of satisfying each word, as I mentioned in the experience with my nun friend, can satisfy many beings at the same time. So as Lama Tsongkhapa says, should all the sentient beings of the world ask him all at once to resolve their doubts, he would in front of all of them at the one time, with one speech, and using his one body, perform the deed of resolving their misconceptions. And this happened at the time of the Buddha. He would appear in different ways, in different forms, in different places, either in the same place or in different places, and teach to different beings according to their capacity. I mean, I've already spoke about the story of Angulimala, how he was able to just direct him exactly at the right time, with the right way. The power, just a few words, and Angulimala developed this deep sense of regret for his actions and took sort of spontaneous refuge in the Buddha. So it's said that Buddha actually has 64 qualities of speech. And as I say, this one of going straight to the mind, straight to the heart of the disciple. And it has this quality, the quality of Buddha's speech of being very pleasing to hear, not harsh or cruel. And it kind of, refreshes or energizes us, soothes the mind, makes us happy. And again, I would say that in front of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Lama Yeshe. I didn't meet Lama Yeshe, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Everybody's always happy to go to teachings with these gurus. There's a sense of happiness and joy. And when you're in their presence, it's like you don't have any other problems. In that moment, when you're in front of them, you're receiving teachings, it's kind of all consuming because your mind's so kind of directed and all our other problems in that time seem to sift away and you just hear that soothing presence of the teaching, it kind of just so much merit and purification just being in the presence and listening to them. So again, at the time when the Buddha taught, one of the times when he was teaching at Rajgriha, most of us know the Heart Sutra, and that was taught at Rajgriha, a place just outside Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha achieved enlightenment, was in Bodh Gaya. So he taught the Heart Sutra, the Prajna Paramita, not just the Heart Sutra, but the collection of all three versions of the wisdom teachings, Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. There's a long version, medium, and a brief version. So he actually taught them to a variety, not just humans, it was non-humans, it was gods, it was deities. I mean, it depended on who you personally or karma to see. If we were there, we had the fortune, we might have seen humans. Maybe if we were an ant at that time, maybe we saw, who knows? Maybe we were there in some form, We have a connection with the Buddha. But at that time, he taught those three. And so the long version is 100,000 verses, Middle version is like, I think 20,000, short one's 5,000, something like that. So he taught them simultaneously to the different faculties of disciples. So this is just one example of how they can teach, these diverse teachings simultaneously at the same time to different levels and faculties, mental faculties. I mean, the Buddha taught 84,000 sets of teaching, so that if we think about it, he lived, he taught for about 50 years. I don't think he would have been able to complete that in 50 years if he hadn't been teaching things simultaneously or at different times, different realms. There's no way he would have completed that without some sort of simultaneous type of teaching going on. So it's quite marvelous. So again, these are things, as the mind opens and develop, we can all develop these qualities. I think that's why Lama Zopa she has us start where we are, bless your speech. It's not a long practice. It's very nice, once you get used to it. And it's, eventually through those practices, we get very powerful speech, and then that power, because we find, even if we want to help people, they don't listen, most of the time. So if we have power of speech, you can really help. It also says one of his disciples, Modgaliana, one of his close disciples, said that he was one that was famous for psychic powers. And so he was able to fly, go off to other realms. And he went to many Buddha fields to try to measure the how far the Buddha's speech carried. And he couldn't, similar to like we talked about last week, the Ashnisha of the Buddha, one bodhisattva tried to travel to other realms to see how tall it was, and he didn't find the end. He got tired and came back again. Similarly with this, this disciple tried to go as far as he could, and he could still hear the speech of the Buddha. And of course, it depends on our merit what we hear. But I would see even like for somebody like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I think when people attend those teachings, we all hear something different. And I'm sure if you have, certain realizations, like the speech has this kind of it's like the lion's roar, it's very powerful. And I'm sure we can see, not even talking about other realms, how much somebody like His Holiness affects thousands of people through his virtuous speech, the power of his speech. I can say something exactly the same as His Holiness, but there's no way it would have the same effect. His Holiness can say very simple things, but such a profound effect, like my religion is kindness. I mean, that's massive. It's very simple and profound, but it's also like it's had a huge impact on the world, these things that His Holiness comes out with, because the power of his speech. So we can always rejoice, it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful how these great holy beings have such power to benefit others, to influence people's hearts and minds so deeply. The good qualities of the Buddha's mind. So, of course, his Buddha mind is filled with infinite qualities, all embodying either wisdom, compassion, bodhicitta, method. But, the main quality is that it's all-knowing. So this is supposed to be an image of the sky here. To show this kind of all-knowing quality, like the sky, there's nowhere in this world that we can walk to that we don't see the sky, and that we know the sky doesn't cover, yeah? The sky covers this whole universe that we're part of, this world system. So like that, as an analogy, there's nowhere that the Buddha's mind, his wisdom doesn't pervade. It pervades all phenomena, all beings, all phenomena, all objects, animate, inanimate. The wisdom pervades everything, so it knows the nature of all beings, all phenomena. And it's knowing these continuously without break. There's not a second when the Buddha's mind is not separated from knowing all phenomena. And not just the present phenomena, he knows past, present, and future. That's why it was the Buddha, with the Buddha, when he achieved enlightenment, even he couldn't see first life, there wasn't a first life. It's beginningless. That's what he said. Consciousness is beginningless. And so is lives, lives are beginningless. And the extent is wisdom is that, for example, if we chopped a table into millions of pieces, we chopped it apart, took it in an aeroplane and threw it out the aeroplane, and all the pieces just scatter everywhere, you know, far and wide. Well, a Buddha mind could trace all these pieces. It would see exactly where they are, that they were where they were part of a table, and also before what they where they existed before the table, the tree they came from, the seed they came from. You know, it's just this like huge long dependent arising of where things sprout and come from. The Buddha sees all of that, all these, you know, like our past lives, so many past lives, seeds and imprints and karmas that we've created. So that's why he's fully qualified to guide us, because he knows our exact capability, you know, the exact kind of quality, our mind stream, you know, our capability, what level we're at, you know. So he knows exactly what to teach us, how to guide us, as we've seen, you know, like as I say, Angulimala was a prime example of that, you know. So, and there's many stories like that in the sutra. Only the Buddha knew the past karmas of certain beings and was able to predict what teaching was right for them, and also when they would achieve realizations and enlightenment. He gave many predictions like that at the time when he was walking on this earth. There's one story of an 80-year-old who wanted to become a monk, and Shariputra, his close disciple, thought he was too old, you know, and didn't feel like he had the karma, you know, to enter into the monastery at that age. And the Buddha appeared because he started to cry, you know, this 80-year-old man. And the Buddha appeared and said, you can actually become a monk, because many lifetimes ago, many eons ago, when you were circumambulating a stupa, you were a fly, and not you didn't motivate, but you you were chasing, you were following the smell of the dung on the other side of the stupa, so you circumambulated. That was the motivation, you know, to get to the dung. But because of that virtue, because the stupa has a power, you know, every time you circumambulate a holy object, you create a seed for enlightenment, because that holy object embodies that quality. So because of that, you have that seed or imprint, you can become a monk this life. Because not everybody has the karma ordained, even though you want to ordain, you know, it's not like the lamas give everybody the permission. Because sometimes if you don't have the karma, then it can result in something more, it can become a disaster, actually, you know. It doesn't benefit you, it doesn't support you in your practice at that time in that life. But the Buddha saw that he did actually have the karma to be ordained. And, you know, not to go into the longer story, but he actually achieved arhatship. He developed renunciation in that life and achieved arhatship. And that's another story. Maybe I'll tell it another time. But so the Buddha can see all the subtleties, the subtle aspect to our karma. So again, it's quite amazing, you know. And yeah, I mean, just sharing again in my experience with Lama's Rinpoche, I felt like, you know, I mean, when you see these beings who develop that kind of connection, you feel like they know you much deeper than you know yourself, you know. I mean, you have to kind of give into that at some point. And you need to feel that, you know, you have to develop that trust with that being. But it's like, it's kind of really mind blowing when you look back 10 years later and go, wow, I didn't know that about myself. But now here it is, and it was true, and you know, so it's incredible, you know, it's so much. You know, if we just develop some part of that, there's unbelievable what you can offer to others, you know. So that's just like, again, these are just hints, because as I say, we're not, you know, I don't have a lot of time to go into these. So that's kind of the qualities. And of course, the other quality, as we know, is the quality of compassion, you know, undeclining, fully developed, spontaneous compassion for every living being. I mean, that never diminishes the compassion equally for all. The mind's fully trained in that. There's full equanimity. It doesn't matter what being's in front of you, the compassion is the same, you know, whether it's Devadatta in the case of the Buddha or his son Rahula, there's no change, there's no difference in the compassion. And also that sort of really deep sensitivity to suffering and the causes of suffering, you know, that's in the Buddha's mind. And that's what brings this spontaneous compassion. So it's a very beautiful state of mind, you know, to develop. It's a beautiful state of mind to be in the presence of. I mean, as I say, when people are in the presence of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I mean, you just get blissed out, you know, you're so happy. There's this peace and joy and happiness, they emanate that. So, you know, it's wonderful if we can develop just a, you know, just a hint of that, you know, that quality, and we can through the power of refuge, you know, it kind of, it gives a kind of This practice of refuge starts to open that up in us, awaken that quality, because we're connecting. When we take refuge, we're opening up to that quality. We develop an aspirational faith in it, and it starts to nurture that quality within us, just this practice of refuge. This kind of faith, this aspiring or wish to achieve, what the Buddha achieved, those levels of mind, those inner qualities that satisfy all beings. Okay, so another quality that the Buddha has, on top of the qualities his body, speech, and mind, but again, which are vast, and we're just touching on them. The good qualities, the Buddha activities. Now I have a picture of Tara here. Some of us may have done some Tara. I think some of us have definitely done some Tara practice. Maybe quite familiar, enjoy that practice. Ladan was just mentioning she did her Tara practice day with Yangtze Rinpoche. It's a very female aspect to the Buddhas. Her aspect, her character actually is, her quality is, she's known as the embodying the Buddha's activities, all the activities, all the awakened ones, Um, so for us, right now, activity, of course, it comes action, it means action. So in the previous module, what was karma? Karma is action. So as ordinary beings, we're creating action all the time. We're body, speech, and mind. We're doing actions. That's our energy. We are active in every moment, even through the bardo. We're creating some karma, because we're always doing things with our body, speech, and mind, whether it's on a gross level, a subtle level, or a more very subtle level. There's always activity. But the difference between us and the Buddhas is that we're creating impure karma right now. Our actions, our body, speech, and mind, because we're influenced, still covered by ignorance, we haven't liberated ourselves for that. So our actions create impure karma that can still result in happiness, a type of happiness in future lives, no killing, no stealing, no lying, helping others, good heart, they all create good karma. But it's still karma that brings us into samsara, cyclic existence. So the Buddhas, what they have activity, enlightened activity. So in Tibetan, the word for karma is la, L-A. For the Buddha, the Buddhas, their enlightened activity is chinla. So it's pure activity. It doesn't produce suffering, confusion, future rebirth. It's just full of joy, happiness. It's perfect. Their activities are perfected, So their body, speech, and minds are continually working for others. It's like this mind-to-body cheetah. It's depending on the level. The level of the Buddha is fully perfected. So it's spontaneously, without break, benefiting beings according to our level of karma. They can only benefit us according to our level of karma. But they definitely want to help us, So like, for example, when you do the Tara mantra, there's all these temporary and ultimate benefits, She has her right leg extended, which, sorry, I didn't show here, but that's showing that this enlightened quality of always being there, If we take refuge in Tara, recite her mantra, say the refuge prayer, then she will come to our guide, She will come to us, and even with temporary things, she has this power, and so she's embodying that activity of Buddha mind. And the beauty of it is, there's no laziness, there's no discouragement. They've gone beyond all that. It doesn't matter if sentient beings are behaving or not, they love us. But of course, we have to have a certain level of morality, a certain level of faith and merit to be able to receive, become a recipient of the enlightened activities. It's not that they don't want to help us, but we just don't, we have to create a pathway in our own mind to receive that. And again, I would often see that in the example of Rinpoche, it doesn't matter. I mean, running an organization, you can imagine starting a Buddhist organization in the West. If FBMT became, and still is, like well over 100 centres, services and projects. Now we see in our lives, just one organization, maybe we're at work, in our family, one place where there's a few beings and there's always some stuff. Wherever Zonzar Khenze Rinpoche, he's another Lama and Nyingma tradition, he said he used the expression, wherever there's people, there's problems. And it's true, you know. Of course, depends on our level of mind. But you know, so to run for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, run a huge organization, you know, and Rinpoche had he really put his heart and soul. I mean, not eating, not sleeping. Everything was dedicated to developing this organization and beyond many other projects Rinpoche was involved in as well. But you know, and so of course there's always going to be so many problems, you know. I mean, you know, even at Rimshi's house, you know, Roger, his attendant would come up. I would be doing the water bowls in the room, and Roger would be talking to Rimshi, and there was this problem in this centre and that thing and that one. And you know, so Rimshi had to give advice, you know, and deal with that. But there was never no discouragement, you know. They just where they can, they benefit, you know. There's no the mind doesn't go down. And that's what's hard for us, you know. We put all our passion and effort into something and then it doesn't work out and we can get discouraged. We can give up, you know. So the Buddha mind's gone beyond all that, you know. So it's that's why they're always there to benefit us, you know. If we're there, if we're present, we're there, we have the karma merit. And in a level, you know, they're keeping mind, keeping track of us all the time. You know, there's a story now, I think I shared the story of a Sangha. We remember the story of Sangha? This is a good example, you know. So who knows, remembers the story of Sangha? Sure, Urs, Bay, yeah. Denise, you know the story of Sangha?
I've read it several times, but it's not just popping in my
It
head.
doesn't pop to your head, eh? So just in a nutshell, a Sangha was, you know, this, you know, living around the second, third century, and he, you know, his wish was to have a vision of Buddha Maitreya. So Maitreya would take him at the Pure Land and receive teachings. Yeah, so Maitreya Buddha is the future Buddha after Shakyamuni Buddha, and he lived around, I think, second, third century in India. So he was a Pandi, a scholar. Then he went into retreat and he wanted to, you know, have these visions. So first 3 years he was in a cave meditating and he thought, oh, you know, nothing's really happening. He was doing all these mantras and practices and not you don't he wasn't receiving any vision. So I think after 6 years, something, I'm just cutting it down really here. But after about 6 years, he says, oh, nothing's happening. So he came down he started to walk down the hill and he saw this man rubbing a rock with a feather. And he's like, well, what are you doing there? And he says, well, I'm trying to make a needle. And he thought, well, he thought to himself, if you've got you know, the kind of determination to make a needle through rubbing a rock with a feather, you know, surely I can go back up and can carry on my retreat. That's a much more important activity, you know, than making a needle. So he went, but he felt inspired. He went back up the hill. He went, okay, did another 3 years, came down again, and he saw something similar, like somebody using there was this something with there was some sort of obstructing thing in front of someone's house, again, a big rock or something, and somebody was rubbing it again with a cloth. I'm maybe getting the story right, not quite right, because I didn't look it up before. I always have to remind myself before class. But the idea was that he saw someone again doing this sort of impossible task of trying to thin down this object with a cloth, you know, that was something really hard and tough, you know, and soften it with this kind of really thin material. And he's like, oh, God, if he can do that, just so he can, because he was trying to get more light to come into his house. So he was trying to like thin down this rock somehow, you know, rub away at this rock. So I thought, okay, if he can do that, I can do another 3 years, you know. I mean, this is a very virtuous activity here, you know. So he went back up the hill, and after 12 years, he's like, okay, that's it. It's not happening. I've given up, you know. So he's walking down the hill and he comes across a very sick dog, really ill, you know, pus, blood, flesh sticking out. It was injured. It was like maggots eating from it. And you know, it was hungry, thirsty, and he felt so much compassion for the dog that he cut off a piece of his flesh. You know, he thought, well, it needs nourishment, you know, so he cut a bit of his flesh and he offered it to the dog. But then he thought, well, what about the maggots? You know, because if the dog gets better, what's going to happen to the maggots? And I'm worried for them. So he started he used his tongue, he put his tongue out and thought, you know, I don't want to injure them. So I'll just take them out of the rotting flesh of the dog with my tongue. So he put his tongue towards the dog. And I mean, he was squirming a little bit, but it's like, you know, I need to save the maggots. He was feeling so overwhelmed with compassion. Put his tongue out and then he couldn't feel the maggots. He opened it, aye, and Buddha Maitreya was there. Why? So that happened because because he's compassion for the dog and the maggots, he purified his mind to see Buddha Maitreya. And so, there's a whole other story beyond that, which I won't carry on with, but basically it's kind of showing that the Buddhas are all, so, and he actually said to Buddha Maitreya, well, where were you? This is how it goes, the story. And Buddha Maitreya says, I was in your cave all the time. You just didn't see me. You didn't have the karma to see me. And Maitreya pointed to his robes. And he said, look, there's spit marks on here. When you were clearing your throat, I was sitting in the corner of your cave and you kind of cleared your throat on my robes, and you can see them here. So anyway, this is how this story goes. But the point is that like the Buddhas are always, like Maitreya Buddha was always there, but he didn't have the karma to see him. So, and Maitreya Buddha also said he manifested as a dog. So purifying his mind with compassion for the dog allowed him to see Maitreya, and then Maitreya, took him to the Pure Land at that time to receive teaching. So again, it depends on our level of merit, what we see, what we experience. So this is why we have all these practices to purify, collect merit, why we take refuge deeply, because we have obscurations to be able to see the Buddhas and feel them, but they're present. And so my experience was once I started doing some of these practices, you do start to feel, wow, there's something going on there. You start to feel their presence, even though you can't maybe see them. That's the benefits of doing these practices. Okay. One second. Hopefully get this back up right. Okay. So that's some of the qualities of the Buddhist activities. They're always, there's not a time when they're not there with us, Okay, so that's just again, touching on some of the qualities of the Buddha. So that's the qualities of the Buddha, qualities of the Dharma. Qualities of the Dharma jewel are also countless, inconceivable. The Buddha jewel arises from the realization of the Dharma jewel. So the Buddha comes from, manifests from that realization, the realization that's come out of the Dharma. By realizing the Dharma jewel ourselves, we achieve Buddhahood. So here I have an image of, which deity is this? Someone? I'll ask a question. Anybody? Who knows? Do I see any hands? Want to put your hand up? Bay, who's this? Do you know which deity this is? Oh, there's something in the chat. Oh, hold on. You can see the notes when I do that as well. Let me just, sorry, share again. Yeah. Bay, do you know who the deity is?
No.
No? Urs?
It's Tara because of her stripy leggings.
No, it's not Tara, but good guess.
Is it Prajnaparamita?
Yes, well done, Ladan, yes. So Prajnaparamita, yes. Prajnaparamita is the embodiment, as it says, she's the female aspect embodying the wisdom teachings, the perfection of wisdom sutras. So she's holding in her left hand there a sutra, that's the wisdom sutras, Prajnaparamita, perfection of wisdom sutras. So I just wanted to kind of put her there because actually, as it says here, and she's female because it's like from this, it's like a mother, we're born from the mother, So similarly, the Buddhas are born from this wisdom realizing emptiness. That's where Buddhas are born from, that wisdom. That's the main cause of Buddhahood, is wisdom realizing emptiness. On top of that, we develop other levels of bodhicitta, but it's really from this wisdom realizing emptiness that our Buddhahood is born. And that's the main Dharma jewel, that ultimate jewel of wisdom. So that's showing in this female aspect. So it's showing this mother aspect, this mothering aspect of being born, you know. All the Buddhas are born from this quality of wisdom. And of course, the Dharma jewel, it's that which, so another word, another connotation of Dharma is to hold. You know, the Dharma holds us up from suffering. It protects us from any kind of suffering, you know, mental suffering. It definitely protects us eventually, you know, as we develop our mind. It's going to protect us even from the physical sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Once we develop the Dharma jewel, then we get protected from outer suffering as well, you know, once the mind's developed in these qualities. So that's a quality Dharma jewel. And for us, very fortunately, over the centuries, you know, that the Buddha taught 84,000 sets of teachings, which, you know, can you imagine if we were trying to, if we got interested in the Dharma and there was 84,000 sets of teachings, I mean, where do you start, you know? So because of these holy beings that have come over the century, Lama Tisha especially, who came to Tibet in the 11th century, he condensed, distilled the teachings down into the Lam Rim, you know, the gradual path to enlightenment, and something that's very digestible for us, you know, we can manage, we can do that and still achieve the Dharma jewel in our mind, you know. So Dharma jewel's countless, you know, and it really embodies, it's like, you know, from that, our Buddhahood is born. It's the, you know, it's like a medication, it's meditation, it's the medication that we need to take to relieve ourselves, to release ourselves from samsara, you know. So that's like the Buddha as the teacher, again, we always say, the doctor, the skillful kind of guide, you know, the Dharma is the medicine that has to be taken, that has to be practiced, studied, reflected upon, meditated upon, and that then it becomes the jewel in our mind, you know. And the Sangha, you know, Sangha here are the, you know, the qualities of Sangha jewel inconceivable. They have also, you know, the Sangha jewel, the actual Sangha jewel have achieved the realizations of the Dharma jewel. They've achieved the realizations of, you know, one Arya Sangha, one Sangha jewel is one being, at least one being who's achieved wisdom realizing emptiness, you know, our Arya being. So we talk about that last week, you know, I mean, we do talk about the Sangha in terms of each of us who practice, but really the Sangha jewel is necessarily someone who has a realization of emptiness, you know, one being at least who has a realization of emptiness in their mind, you know, that's really what the proper Sangha jewel is. And of course, even if we don't have that, the Sangha also have qualities like renunciation, you know, trying to develop, you know, freedom from samsara, trying to liberate ourselves with birth and death. That's renunciation, you know, this kind of aspiration, this wish. The mind, the life is guided in that direction. With our body, speech, and mind, trying to guide ourselves out of samsara. That's what the Sangha are doing, you know, that they're motivated by that, motivated by qualities like non-attachment, you know, less attachment. That's what the robes show, you know. Even at the level of lay practitioners, upasaka, upasika, you know, who have taken vows.
Angie, we cannot see the slide.
You can't see the slide. Oh. Has that been like that for a while? Let me just, I don't know. Sorry, this is what
I
happens.
think there were notes earlier, and then when you switch that off, this
Okay, let's try again.
disappear.
Sorry about that. I'm not really good at moving the slides in and out yet. I haven't quite developed that. So let's start again. Let me know, Bae, what we're on now. So can you see it now?
Yes, I can
Okay.
see the slide, but also the notes at the bottom as well.
Oh yeah, that's right. From current slide. I mean, it's okay if you see the notes, but here we
Okay.
go. From current slide.
Okay.
Interview.
Now
How's
it's
that? Just the slide?
just the slide now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, so qualities of the Sangha jewel are limitless. The Sangha jewel themselves have necessarily achieved realizations of the Dharma jewel. The Sangha jewel themselves have necessarily also attained exalted qualities. So again, yeah, just touching on Arya Sangha, You know, at least our Sangha Jewel encompasses at least one being who has that direct perception emptiness in their mind. But, you know, the Sangha Jewel have many qualities that we aspire to, you know, having renunciation, non-attachment, even as lay practitioners, you know, for lay practitioners holding vows, trying to become less attached, you know, trying to have some kind of moral discipline in one's life, you know, courage to practice that. The Sangha Jewel necessarily was, you know, more compassion for others, loving kindness, generosity, morality. So even at the level of conventional Sangha, we have these qualities, you know, and that's what we're aspiring towards. So they are sources of inspiration for us on the path. So, yeah, so just again, touching on those three qualities of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. So the more we read about them, you know, the more we get, hopefully, we develop a little bit more kind of aspirational faith to develop those qualities. That's the idea, you know, when we read and reflect, we start thinking how wonderful that is, you know, and so when we do the refuge prayer, you know, when we recite the refuge prayer, for those of us who have already taken refuge, we try to think about that, even if it's just for a moment, you know, reflecting on the qualities of Buddha or the Dharma, or the Sangha, anything that we come to mind when we recite it in the morning or the evening. Thinking about their qualities to be able to protect us, aspiring to achieve those qualities, thinking about how we need them, you know, like we need anything when we want to develop anything, any kind of skill in our lives. We have to rely on a teacher. We have to rely on the teachings, the advices, you know, and we have to rely on usually others who are a bit more skilled than us, you know, who can also support us. So it's just that basic. So that's kind of some of the way we can deepen our refuge, you know, as we really study and reflecting on the qualities of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, and alongside of that, developing our Lamrim practice generally, you know, these three levels of motivation of lower capable being, middle capable being, higher capable being. So here we see in the image here, there's an image here, Refuge in the Three Jewels. That's a booklet you can buy from, you can order online from our FPMT Foundation store. So if you have, and it just goes through. So one part of this, you know, course is just going through, even if some of us haven't taken refuge yet, it's a little bit, we just go over a little bit more, the refuge, the vows, the kind of it's more like commitments that we try to practice once we've taken refuge. So maybe we're thinking about taking refuge. So what does that look like? You know, what kind of commitments, how would we want to practice once we take refuge? So again, refuge is a ceremony you take usually with a teacher. You know, one of your usually a monastic teacher. And then it's kind of a bit like in church when you get christened, you know, a little bit like that. You decide, you know, this is your life path, this is what you want to practice, that you want to develop. You know, you feel like this is kind of your religion, your spiritual practice for life, and you want to develop in that. So you can go through a refuge ceremony to take that. And then through reading, you know, in this booklet, it tells you some of the commitments, as it says, that you take, you try to follow and practice once you've taken refuge. So it's really applicable to all of us. And even though some of you have taken refuge, I always find it's a reminder. I have to, you know, from time to time, it's really good to go through those commitments and make sure we're practicing. Because again, refuge is the foundation, you know, of all the other practices. It's like this foundation we need to keep develop. I mean, all the Lamrim we need to develop, but it is the foundational practice, becoming in inner being, you know, seeking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, developing that practice internally, because it supports all the other aspects of the Lamrim as we go on through the other topics. So what are the commitments we take, you know? So Kate, you asked me about this last week. I think it was you, Kate, asked about, you know, once we've taken refuge in the Buddha, we should not take refuge in the depths of one's heart and worldly gods, such as Brahma and so on. One should not prostrate to such objects. One should not entrust oneself from the depths of one's heart to non-virtuous friends or teachers of non-Buddhist teachings. So, Kate, am I right that you asked me about this last week? Was this kind of along the lines of more or less this commitment you were asking me about last week, Kate?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, what it means here is, so again, one should not take refuge from the depths of one's heart. So we're not saying don't respect other religions. I mean, actually, what I find really helpful in the Buddhist teachings is how important it is to respect other religions, because not everybody's going to be Buddhist, right? Not everybody's going to be Christian. No matter how much other religions may want you to become their religion, it's not our karma, you know. When we understand karma, we have different capacities. Even the Buddha taught many, many types of teachings. You know, he taught 3 different vehicles of teachings, many baskets of teachings, many different levels, even different schools on emptiness, on the nature of reality. You know, how to understand that. So even within Buddhism, there's many capabilities of being. So never even beyond that. I mean, other beings, you know, other religions work for other beings' minds. If it's going to make them more compassionate, more kind, practice morality, you know, that's the essence of many religions. Whether that gets lost or not is another thing, but it is the essence of most religions. So here we're talking about not taking a sense of refuge in that. It doesn't mean not respecting. So I've got a picture of His Holiness here. I mean, we know one of His Holiness's missions, he always says in this life, is interfaith harmony, you know, creating harmony within the different religions and faiths, you know. So he's promoted that widely over many, many years, you know. So including going to other, you know, other places, you know, Christian, Muslim, Judaism. I mean, he's visited and he's deep friends with many, many kind of practitioners of other religions. But still, you know, His Holiness is a Buddhist. You know, what His Holiness teaches is Buddhist teachings, you know. But he has a deep respect for other spiritual practitioners, other religious practitioners. He joins ceremonies sometimes with other religions, I think really just to show this promotion of harmony, but it's more from the depths of our heart, what we practice, what we study, what we utilize to develop our own minds is the practice of the Buddhas, Dharma and Sangha, you know, that's our refuge. So on our altar, you know, where we make offerings, where we do our practice, it would consist of, you know, Buddhist images of the Buddha, our teachers, you know, those who inspire us, you know, that's our main object of refuge. Is that helping, Kate? Or have you got another question on top of that, around that?
It's very
Yep.
helpful to see this. My question centered around like when we consider ourselves, if we're taking refuge correctly, it's just the world is a complicated place. If my heart is, I am fully devoted to the Buddhist teachings, I see no other thing as truth. Should I still be worried if I've taken refuge enough, if like I don't care about the images, you know, and things like that? It's a question of like, when we take refuge, what's the main thing that we should know about ourselves to know if we have it right in our own hearts? Do you know what I mean? And this was a big question for me with this one. How much is this a sign that we've taken refuge or not? You know?
Yeah. Have you actually taken refuge, Kate? Do you mind me asking?
Yes, I did a while ago.
Okay, right. Well, I think, you know, that also, you know, like all these practices in the Lamrim, all these topics, it's an organic process, yeah? You know, our refuge builds over time. The more we study the teachings, the more we reflect, the more we meditate. Organically, our process of becoming an inner being, a Buddhist, and taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in that respect grows, you know. That organically, that's generally what happens, you know, as we study, reflect, meditate, question, you know, but we have to keep doing the practices. I mean, even though we take the refuge ceremony, we might have a ways to go before from the depths of our heart, as it says here, we take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. You know, that's a realization in itself, you know. So when we get to the end of this, I actually have a slide at the very end here that His Holiness said, so there might be different signs that show that your refuge is deepening. So one sign His Holiness said, you know, and this comes again at the end of the class, he said, you know, when we start to have a more sort of deeper feeling of karma and change our actions so they're more in alignment with karma, you know, not harming others, be more compassionate and kind. That's one more sign, our refuge. That's one sign of having refuge. Is that helping a little bit?
Yes, it helps a lot. Thank you very much.
I mean, you know, so there's different, I think that as we develop, there's different signs, and even in, you know, in the level of motivation of taking refuge, there's 3 levels of motivation. So there's 3 levels of experience of refuge. First level is because we don't want to suffer in future lives, or even in this life, you know. We want happiness, you know, and we don't want to go to a lower realm, you know. Wherever we are with that understanding, we take refuge, right? Because most of us know at the time of death, we're not going to have control over our faculties. You know, it's not going to be easy for most of us. I think we might not have that level of mind in meditation. So one thing you can do at the death time is take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. If you've developed a certain level of faith and conviction, you can do refuge, visualize the Buddha at the time of death, you know. So that's one level of that's one sign of taking refuge, that you feel that who you can rely on at the death time, and you know that you're leaving everything. You're leaving the whole appearance of this life. You know, you don't know where you're going for most of us. Do you feel like if you visualize the Buddha, thought about some of his qualities, you know, would that be a refuge for you? That's a sign that you have some refuge. If you feel like that's something you would do at the death time, you would take that level of refuge. The next level is, you know, thinking more when you develop this mind of renunciation, that more deeply you're taking refuge in the Buddha because you want to get out of samsara. Third level is you really want to benefit. And not just like day to day, moment to moment, and more worldly things, but a deep benefit in terms of accomplishing a deep benefit of your mind, this mind to bodhicitta. But I think for us as Westerners, you know, maybe we can think, you know, well, who would I rely on in times of difficulty, fear, problems? You know, would I think, well, the refuge, I would take refuge in my practices. Of course, we take refuge in friends and family, but really, what's the real refuge is our practice, you know. The practice that we're using in front of us, you know, to support our mind. So that's maybe that's one way to think about it and question, you know, would I rely on the Buddha? Would I be relying on my praxis to really support and help my mind in this particular fear or difficulty or problem I'm in? You know, and especially at the death time. That's a sign of refuge when you feel a conviction that the Buddha can support you, your praxis to support you at the death time. So that's one commitment. Another commitment is, having taken refuge in the Dharma, we should avoid harming any being, either directly by oneself or indirectly by making others do that. So that's another, you know, this is the second level kind of commitment in terms of having taken refuge in the Dharma. So again, we become an inner being, you know, a student of the truth, someone who's trying to devote ourselves to virtuous actions, and not just for our own sake, but for others. So again, here we can say, well, even if we can't benefit others, but we're, you know, maybe at this level, we're talking about taking vows and no killing, no stealing, no lying, trying to train in them. That's a way we can train to not harm others. But we have taken this commitment anyway by taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And we just train in it further by taking, you know, by sort of aspiring to or already have taken some of these vows. And it's not just humans, it's all beings, you know, even the slightest, you know, bug, animal, anything as much as possible, like having the strong kind of conviction or strong determination not to harm others directly or indirectly. And of course, the nature of samsara, right? You know, we do indirectly harm others. We, you know, through eating, through driving, walking, the clothes we wear, you know, the beings are indirectly involved in that process and often receive a harm, you know, but it's indirect, you know. So the vows, you know, we can't completely eliminate not harming others altogether because we need to survive. But this is the compassionate way that the Buddhists taught us to gradually get out of samsara. I mean, once we're out of the cycle of birth and death, we're not involved in harming any being at all. We don't need clothes, we don't need food, we don't need a roof over our head that involves, you know, for a house to be built, you know, that involves breaking the ground and all these things, you know. So that alone, when we think about the amount of harm, just, you know, other beings that we need to rely on to just be in samsara, to be in this body, that can be that can be, you know, that's a deep meditation on developing renunciation, this wish to get out of samsara. Because in that out of samsara, we're not involved in harming others at all. But at least now we take this vow that's manageable to not harm others indirectly, you know, or as much as possible, or indirectly by asking others to do it. So the next part, having taken refuge in the Sangha, we should avoid entrusting ourselves and keeping company with friends, you know, friends that don't support our practice. So of course, we might not all be surrounded by Buddhist friends. We probably aren't at all, you know. So it's not possible, you know, for us to be just be surrounded by Buddhist friends, you know. So I mean, and we don't. It's not that we mentally reject people who are maybe not supporting us, maybe negative, maybe just living for this life, don't think about karma, you know, just self-gratification, you know, like that. We should have compassion for these beings, you know, so we try not to be judgmental, but it's really just about trying to at least develop friends who support your practice, partners that are supportive. They don't have to be Buddhist, but they're okay with you doing, you know, doing what you do spiritually. You know, I remember in the early days as a nun, and sorry, maybe if someone's got a chat we can do in a minute. When I was a nun and, you know, I had some Dharma friends, lay friends, and they were like, oh, then they meet the Dharma and they're like, oh, I really, you know, I'd really like to, because I was quite young. So I had some friends that were young and they weren't going to become ordained, but they wanted to, you know, have partners, and they all wanted to have Buddhist partners. And, you know, I found that for some of them, it didn't really work. They would try to have Buddhist partners, but somehow personality-wise, it wasn't working or whatever. And what I saw was actually it was much better to just have partners who supported you. Doesn't matter if they're another religion or even if they don't call themselves religious or spiritual, but they're kind and they're okay, they support you in your practice. I think that's more important than necessarily finding Buddhist friends or Buddhist partners, Buddhist husbands and wives. I mean, of course, it's lovely if you can, and I do know some couples are both Buddhist practitioners and it really works. But it's not, it's more about just having people within your environment that are supportive. And sometimes that's even difficult when you meet the Dharma, you know, some family members, they can't accept it. My father used to literally say I was off my head. And I became a nun. He couldn't relate to it at all. He's softened now in his 80s, but he used to think I was off my head, literally. That's a Scottish expression. Is that an expression in America? Probably. So, you know, I've been there and done that. So, yeah, it's just as much as we can having people who support us, you know, having friends, and even if it has to be outside the family who are supportive. Okay, so chat. We got some out of your mind. Okay, that one. Yeah, my dad said it was off your head. Can you show point 1 again, please, when appropriate? Okay, I can go back to that. We'll go back. Point 1. This one. This one, Denise?
Yes, thank you.
Do you have a question off your head? Yeah, there you go. Joe knows it. I didn't want to say that, Joe, because you might even get that, but off your head kind of thing in Scottish, yeah. Joe can totally relate. So, yeah. Did you have a question with that one, Denise, or you just wanted to read it again?
I just wanted to read it one more time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
again, you can download this booklet, you know, that was on the first.
Yeah.
You can download that by donation from our FPMT Foundation store. I really recommend to get it. There's
Yeah.
actually a nice refuge, very simple daily refuge practice in there as well, with a lovely motivation. I used to do it from time to time in my earlier days before I had a lot of other commitments. But even it doesn't matter how many vows, I've taken all these vows, but I need, the refuge vows, without them, none of the other vows work. Again, these are all, they all have these level of containers, these levels. It's like one stair leads to the next to get up, so we need to keep going back again and reminding ourselves all these preliminary vows. And I say that because in light of this first one here, what is to be practiced, having taken refuge in the Buddha with a mind of respect towards those gone to bliss, the Buddhas, that's another term that we often use, those gone to bliss. Buddhas are blissed out all the time. One should regard even statues as being actual Buddhas, and one should prostrate and pay respect to them. So, I mean, this is quite profound, and it is a practice. Again, everything needs to be developed, and you feel that respect the more, the really a respect and a devotion and a faith develops organically as we practice and we feel the benefit of that practice to our mind. I mean, hopefully even some of us by doing this class, whether we're new, whether we're kind of just, developing our practice, it's like hopefully everyone's, there's some benefit to our mind, and just even that small benefit, that small seed of benefit, everything, it's just building up in our mind, and that appreciation starts to grow, that devotion starts to grow as we feel these seeds, like droplets become an ocean eventually, drops just going into a glass, slowly fill up the glass. So like that, all these drops of teachings, drops of listening that we do, it's filling us up, and we get filled slowly like that with devotion and faith, because we feel the benefit of that. So yeah, the story, this is Cardula. I've shown some pictures of Cardula before. She one time she visited a center in Italy, L'Amazon Kappa Institute. And that center's, I think it was either the first, maybe third center that we developed in FPMT around the 80s. And so it's an old center, and they've done many, many study programs, retreats, I mean, many things over 40 years. And at that time, they were renovating, I think. So she arrived in, there was a Buddha statue. They had moved it outside and it was on the ground because they were moving things around. And Cardula saw the statue and started to cry. I mean, she has a whole life of devotion that none of us have, but she just spontaneously cried that the Buddha was on the ground. Because, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like that respect's not there, that, I don't know, I don't know what that experience, I never had that experience before, but I just wanted to share that. Rinpoche would tell that story, it's because this is kind of these are like the preliminary commitments that we need to take along with our lay vows and observing karma. And for a center to have had so many high teachings and high lamas and, so much extensive study, that basic commitment of taking, really respecting Buddha statues, something was not lost there, So it's like, so not to underestimate these basic vows and commitments, to really be careful. And it's hard, it's not in our culture. It takes a time to practice and develop that. Believe you me, it's taken me years too. One time I was here, I mean, I'd been a nun already about 3 years. I may have shared this before. But I always remember it, it inspires me to be careful with Dharma texts, because one time Lama Zoprim, she was coming to teach at the center, and there was, like 100 people coming, and I had all these prayer books, and we didn't have a table for everyone to put them on. So I put them on the seat, we had seats and we had cushions, so I put them on the seat because I didn't want to put them on the floor. Well, Rinpoche came in, and within a few minutes he said, what are this, I mean, I got scolded, why are the texts on the seat? And of course, at that time, because I just arrived at the center, we didn't have enough cloths for all the texts. So, either way, I worked out something. I ended up putting tables at the end of the line and putting all the texts on the tables, and I figured out something else. But for lamas, they would just never do that, you know. They just wouldn't put texts on the bare ground, on a seat. They'd figure out something else. But at that time, my refuge, you know, I didn't really understand. I didn't get the importance of that. So I thought, oh, well, it's okay to put them on the seat. I didn't think another way to do it. There's always another way, right? So like that, you know, that's, and again, it's not culturally something we do. It's very rooted in a lot of Asian cultures, you know, respecting Dharma, you know, the religious texts, not pointing your feet towards religious holy objects, not putting them on the ground, you know. But it is a commitment here. It's a spiritual commitment, and it does something. That practice is a purification practice. It's not something just small. It's, you know, the lamas are incredibly respectful. With Rinpoche, around Rinpoche's holiness, all these holy beings are very, very careful with the texts. And yeah, I just wanted to show this here. Just the purpose. Oh no, wait a minute. Yeah, so this is the one in terms of Buddha statues. So the one with the text is very similar that we're going to get onto too. I'm sorry, covering both at the same time. The text and the statues, it's the same for both. You know, we have to be very careful how we use both of them. But just to go back back to the statues, the images of the Buddha, as is there a quote here that Lama Zopa Rinpoche would quote constantly, you know, there's no difference at all between my 4 kind of followers who are making offerings to me now and those who will make offerings to me at my images in the future. So what that's saying us, and again, that was one of my main praxis, you know, when we prostrate to a Buddha now, an image of the Buddha, we try to have this awareness that it's like prostrating to the actual Buddha. You know, when we purify our mind, like in the case of a Sangha, another great being, Atisha, you know, he had many experiences you can read in the text of beings who have had experiences, statues, communicating with them, talking to them, giving them advice. So when our delusions are thinner, and if we have a level of respect for statues, holy objects, they, you know, they can communicate with us. And I'm sure some of us here may have had that experience, you know. So it's like to kind of, you know, really see them as sacred holy objects, you know, and respect them like that. And this is an image of at Rinpoche's house that I lived in when we had many, many holy objects. And you can sort of see here, there were so many offerings in that room, water bowl offerings. That room alone to do water bowl offerings used to take me 4 hours. So that was how much Rinpoche kind of promoted this practice in making offerings. And we will learn about how to do that in the next module, establishing a daily practice, how to set up a basic altar, how to make a basic offerings. That will be covered in the next module. So anyway, that's a commitment, you know, if we can, to, you know, take care of our holy objects, have them in a high, clean place, make offerings to them when we can, take care of our Dharma texts, and also not using them here for loans as well. Even at the Dharma centres, when we sell books in the shop, we don't use them. We only use that money to buy other holy objects, to buy other books, to buy it's actually all the, you know, the funds we raise from our shop from selling like statues and texts and kind of any kind of mantras, holy objects. It's put into a separate fund, and we only use it for the purchase of other sacred items for things in the altar. So that's also important as well. It can create kind of obstacles in your practice if you sell books and then use that money for eating or for ordinary purposes. So something to think about. Most of us aren't in that business, but it's just something to be aware of. Sometimes that might come up, you know, you want to sell a few Dharma books, then you just want to use it for your spiritual practice, for other spiritual objects, holy objects. It's really better if you can just to kind of donate them, you know, give them away. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, it's like, as we respect these holy objects, so there's this subtle dependent arising that happens to be us to be attracted to the Dharma in the future, to meet the Dharma in the future, to understand the contents of the texts. You know, that much we respect them. It creates this karmic dependent arising to be able to understand and have these realizations that are embodied in the text in the future. So again, it's a whole practice, and it's a practice within itself, something we need to just become familiar with over time. Okay, so having taken refuge in the Sangha, one should regard even one member of the Sangha as being the actual Sangha. We did talk about that a little bit last week, so there's a little bit in the chat. Oh. One should avoid discriminating within the Sangha community, but one should have respect for all. So again, we mentioned the Sangha jewel. Sangha jewel is, really the main Sangha jewel is someone who has realizations, a realization of emptiness in their mind. But, there are many, many Sangha, so one of your commitments is just generally to respect all Sangha. Even if you think, maybe some Sangha are not behaving so well or badly, but, as we say, as a bodhisattva practice on the path, we try to respect everybody, even in a place where people are a little bit bad behaved, but we have a respect we try to, maintain a respect for all beings as much as possible. So in this context, even the Sangha, even what we call ordinary Sangha, because they hold vows in their continuum, so having respect for that, so one aspect of that means, even when and actually His Holiness, what we try, like our robes, we try not to put them on the ground, the red and the yellow, that's a sign of having respect for the Sangha. When you see red, sort of like any kind of material on the ground, that's like, these Sangha have these sitting cloths, so if you were in a teaching and a Sangha had this sitting cloth on their cushion, you try not to walk over it, try not to stand on actually any kind of maroon or red material, because that signifies the Sangha jewel, that's what the Sangha jewel are robed in, those colours, so they have a sort of significance for us. So we try as much as possible to be respectfully, even like small pieces of the monastic robe, not to stand on them, put them in an unclean place. If we see some, a Sangha and the robes falling on the floor, we would do that anyway, help pick them up, so, and there's stories in the scriptures as well when holy beings, they go around and they pick up pieces of robe, and put them in a clean place out of their respect for the Sangha, their deep respect for the Sangha, whether it's ordinary Sangha or, exalted Sangha, Arya Sangha. So because we're coming close to time, is there any questions? Questions? Issues coming up? Otherwise, I'll do a couple of more slides. And then, as I say, we'll probably just have 2 or 3 to finish off in the practice day. And for those of you who don't come, maybe you can, it's always recorded, the practice day, so if you want to catch up that way. Otherwise, we'll just finish off this evening with the general advice. 4 pieces of general advice. What's next? So this is just general advice generally. When you take refuge, we have to keep, as I say, we have to keep doing the 3 things. Anything we want to develop in life, we need to keep listening to get better at it. We need to keep listening to teachings, instructions on that, We need to keep studying it, reading, contemplating. And we need to keep practicing that, embodying that. So that's a given. It's kind of straightforward, yeah. Other general advice, as much as we possible, this attitude in non-harming and having trying to develop a kind, compassionate attitude towards all beings. Because, if people find out you're a Buddhist and then we behave badly, people come to Dharma centres and they see people behaving badly and they can get completely put off of Buddhism, if they're new, because like, oh, wow, look at those Buddhists, So, even us, as our friends and family, I found that the most, my family get most affected with me is not talking about Buddhism, but just trying to be kind, trying to be humble, trying to be patient. That's what attracts them more to Buddhism, is like your quality, you know, just basic qualities of kindness, compassion. So that's what inspires others, you know, being a good example of the basic tenets of the teachings. Another one, when eating or drinking, trying to make effort to offer. So at the start, you know, again, this is really if we've taken refuge, but maybe we want to practice that now. And I know some of us are doing that already. When we offer, before we eat, drink, before we throw it in the mouth, put it down the throat. Some mindfulness, you know, just offer it to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. There's a short prayer you can use, or you just think and mentally offer that to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. That's connecting with our refuge practice, our spiritual refuge, deepening our refuge practice, relying on the Buddha, remembering the kindness of the Buddha we offer first, you know, to Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, we're not there yet, but it might inspire you a little bit. Lama Zopa used to take, well, I mean, not for every meal, but certainly for lunch, main meal, Rinpoche would sometimes take up to 40 minutes to bless the food. You had to have a lot of patience when you were around Rinpoche. Rinpoche's name was patience, so he would teach us patience, you know. So you had to, even if you were really hungry, you had to be patient, you know. So because Rinpoche, you know, and there was one story some of us heard already. Because Rinpoche flew all over the world all the time. So one time Rinpoche was, you know, when you're flying, you get some meals. And one time Rinpoche was spending a long time offering the meals, so the flight attendant came round to collect all the meals, you know, collect everybody because everybody had finished, you know. And Rinpoche was still offering. And so she was a bit like, well, what am I going to do, you know? But Rinpoche said it was okay, the most important part was done, the offering. So she took the meal. So of course I don't have that level of bliss and renunciation and all that, but I try to remember, you know, if you know, like I can do like a minute, you know, 30 seconds, you know, so it can be quite inspiring.
I think airplane food might have had something to do with that.
It could be that, you know, it might have been that, but I think it genuinely was. I mean, genuinely, Rinpoche would spend. One Geshe who had never met Rinpoche before, one Geshe Gelik in North Carolina, some of you maybe know him. He shared me with one time. I only met him one time because he came to Rinpoche's house and we were, you know, sharing stories about Rinpoche. And he said the first time he met Rinpoche, you know, Rinpoche had invited Geshe Gelik and I think some other monks for lunch in South India. They were at teachings and they invited Geshe Gelik for lunch. So he didn't know much about Rinpoche's personality, you know, at that time. So, you know, usually most time, you know, you're my monastic Sangha, you do the 2, 3 refuge, you know, offering prayers. And, you know, it takes a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes at the most. I mean, that's a lot if it takes 5 minutes. Most of the time, most monastics, monks, geshes, lamas, they take, you know, a few minutes to offer the food, the usual prayers. So, of course, Rinpoche starts with that. And of course, Rinpoche's the Lama, so they're waiting on Rinpoche to finish and Rinpoche's going on and he's offering to all the holy, you know, he's doing this extensive offering practice and they're all just sort of looking at each other and they couldn't believe how long Rinpoche was taking. And he said, you know, this was just, I mean, at the time, they kind of just didn't know what to think, you know. But later on, you kind of see that's something quite extraordinary, you know, that quality, you know. So he shared that, like he was just kind of blown away. That was his first experience of being with Rinpoche, doing these extensive offerings, taking 40 minutes or something before they ate the lunch. So another commitment is to do every morning and evening. If you can, you know, or if you want to start doing 3 prostrations to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, again, it's reconnecting with your spiritual refuge when you wake up and before you go to bed, you know, connecting with that blessing. So that's another piece of general advice that's given. And actually we are finishing now because it's not too late. And as I mentioned to Kate, you know, was it Kate, Denise? This sign of refuge, one realization, a sign of that is that having developed some faith in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, is that we really feel how important it is to refrain from negative actions. We really start to observe our karma. So refuge has given your mind courage to do that. Because sometimes it's not easy, you know, when you're in really difficult situations. So through the power of your refuge practice, you've been able to really develop a sense of restraint. contentment in practicing virtue and refraining from negativity. So that's one sign of a realization of refuge. There are others as we develop into the other levelly capable being practices. That's it. We did get through it all. Not too late either. We're just a minute over. So anyway, thank you for joining, everyone. And we will have our, I think, the practice date is on February 8th. Is that right, Isabella? We're still doing that, 10:30 at Land of Medicine Buddha. It'll also be offered online on Zoom.
From my understanding, I thought it was just online.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Can you confirm that with me, Isabella? Because I thought, so it's just online because there's something going on at LMB. Okay. Can you maybe let everyone know that?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I can send out an email.
Yeah, just to confirm everything, that would be great. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll do online. And thanks everybody for joining, participating. And as I say, the next module starts in 2 weeks and it'll be quite practice orientated. How to set up an altar, how to really, some of us have a daily practice. Hopefully it can deepen it a little bit, give a bit more perspective on that. So that'll also be 4 weeks, and then we'll have a practice day for that. And then I will be leaving for the East for 2 months. So you'll have other great teachers coming to help. Well, Venerable Sangha Cadril will be the first one who'll teach after me, but hopefully some of you can join for that module as well. And then we will also have, I will also put together the assignment for everyone, the assessment. I'll do that in the next week or so we get that out to you as well. There's always plenty of time to complete that. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. So let's just spend a minute or two just dedicating. So how wonderful it would be, after this practice, listening and also doing the practice day, that we feel a bit more inspired. We're deepening our refuge. Maybe following more deeply, clearly some of those commitments that we went over. The commitments as a refuge, as taking refuge, and I guess without refuge, maybe we're a refugee, And then when we take refuge, we have something really strongly to take refuge in, Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. We're not out there somewhere else. We found our home, so to speak, It's like that. We find our home. It really feels like that when you take refuge, you find your spiritual home. So I think more and more as they're feeling that, and that's that organic process of feeling our inner spiritual home and deepening that process. And that much more we deepen that, find a level of contentment in our spiritual practice, a level of discipline that we feel we're following, that we feel happy with, so we feel development happening in our mind, in our own spiritual practice. That much we can share with others. Dedicating all the merits of this class, all the merits of our practice now, in the past, in the future, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas merits, all sentient beings merits. Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to always like dedicating all beings merits, widening that, deepening that sense of dedication for ourselves and all sentient beings to achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. Feel inspired, always receive the right guidance, the right support through the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Whatever we need at that time, may we receive that, may all beings receive that in however format they need, all the way up to enlightenment. Janju Senjo Rinpoche Mage Panam Gyurshe Gyewa Nyamba Me Payang Gonne Gondu Pelwar Shok. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that not arisen not decline. May that arisen not decline but increase more and more. Okay, thank you so much. Good night. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Time and effort.
Bye, Angie.
Good night.
Good night.
Hopefully see you soon.
See you
Yeah.
soon. Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.